look at what you've already done. Because a lot of people, the reason they stop is they look at that big obstacle ahead of them and they don't think they can do it. What they fail to do is they don't look behind and see all the obstacles they've already conquered and see that they have an audience that loves them. So I would say for that third tip, just take some time, see what you've already accomplished, and then all those big obstacles look a lot easier.
That is Marc Guberti this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian, and this is my podcast. And each week, I get a chance to sit down with someone who is doing it for themselves. And I've been trying to really firm up what that means. And the only thing that I can possibly use to describe it is that you are chasing a dream. You are doing something because it is what you want to do. And you are not doing it because your parents are telling you that you have to, because your significant other is telling you that you have to, or that maybe not your boss, because you kind of want to listen to your boss from time to time, but you get what I mean, right? You're doing this because it's something that you have a passion for, and it's something that you have always wanted to do. And so each week I get a chance to sit down with someone who is doing just that. And this week my guest is no different. My guest this week is Marc Guberti. And Marc began his journey at the age of 11 years old. When Marc was 11, he was living in New York. His entire family was either a New York Yankees or a New York Mets fan, and Marc somehow became a Boston Red Sox fan. So living in and around New York City, you can imagine that there aren't too many people who root for the Boston Red Sox. And so Marc actually started a blog to meet other Red Sox fans. And this since morphed into multiple blogs that he was using and different online businesses. And now Marc is really focusing in on the internet and content creation and content marketing. So Marc is still young. Up until actually just today, I think Marc was the youngest. It's probably pretty close to a tie with an exciting guest that I am having on the podcast. But Marc is still very young and building some very, very amazing businesses. So I am really looking forward to bringing you this wide-ranging conversation with my guest, Marc Guberti. All right, you ready to get started, Marc?
Ready to roll.
All right, cool, man. Well, Marc, I want to say, thank you so much for getting in touch and scheduling some time to come on to the podcast this evening. I am really looking forward to getting to know your story a little bit better. Obviously, from just first glance, I was very, very intrigued by your story. But the first thing that I need to lead off with, and the first thing that I just need to get out of the way right off the bat, we will get into your obsession, so to speak, with the Boston Red Sox and how much you love that team. But I need to know how you became such a Red Sox fan living in Yankees Nation.
First off, Ian, it's a pleasure to be on your show. And one of the things about my age is that when the Red Sox won the World Series, I was 6, and my dad is a big Yankee fan. My mom's a Met fan, so they were trying to get me on their different teams. And what happened was a mutation. And I was more anti-Yankee than I was Met. So that led actually to the Red Sox. So that's pretty much how it all began. And once it started, it was just something that I stuck with up until now and definitely well beyond as well.
Yeah, that's. I'm sure it makes family parties and baseball season quite interesting, especially not maybe at this time of the year. It's still very very early on in the baseball season, but come August September, I'm sure
Yeah.
things are very little interesting, and I'm sure you really enjoyed your October and November of last year.
Oh yeah, those were great. ALDS was also pretty good.
Yeah. So, well, I want to dive into your story here, and as we said, you watched the Red Sox win a World Series at the age of 6, and you are currently at the age of 21, but you have been in business, so to speak, since you were 11 years old.
Yep.
So let's talk about that a little bit, and let's talk about how you started your first blog and why you started your first blog, focusing on something that you were passionate about, and that was the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, that's why it's important that I became a Red Sox fan in New York because, as anyone knows who follows baseball to any capacity, if you're a Red Sox fan in New York, you don't have that many comrades around you. So I went to blogging to build that community of Red Sox fans. And that's pretty much how it got started. I was really passionate about the Red Sox. I wanted to meet with other fans, which I couldn't do in New York. So blogging became that medium. And once I got that exposure to blogging, I blogged about my team. I saw the potential for it and how it could really turn into a strong business. And that's eventually later down, I got deeper into content marketing. That's where I am now.
And so, about what year was this when you started your blogging? Because blogging has been, relatively new over the last few years. It seems like just with anything on social media and the internet, there was a point where it was very, very new and not too many people had heard of it. And then next thing you know, almost everyone has a blog. So when you started your Red Sox blog, about what time was this, and how new was the blogging, and how did you discover the blogging?
So I started in 2009. This was back when MLB, they had ML blogs. So MLB and logs at the end. So that was how you created content for a baseball blog. So the only reason I learned about WordPress, which is what everyone seems to use, or a lot of people anyway, is that site ML Blogs converted to WordPress and they moved everyone over to WordPress. So that's how I started. Right now, like there is no ML Blogs anymore; it's just WordPress. But that was the platform I used. My mom came across and said this would be a great idea for you to create content about the Red Sox. My brother also created content about the Mets in a similar way, but he definitely had some Met fan friends, while it was certainly harder for me to find a Red Sox fan in New York.
And so this was, I mean, if it was, ML
Yeah,
blogs,
it's really hard to say.
because you want to say MLB, but
Yeah.
so it's ML blogs. This was all something that was relatively new, and you said that you saw some potential. But what was the potential that you saw with this blogging thing, and how did you see it?
So one of the things I wanted to do naturally was build that community, get more Red Sox fans on the blog, seeing my content, being able to engage with them. And, if you want something, you have a question, you go to Google, you get that answer. So I was Googling how to get more blog traffic. And then a few articles later, like, hey, people actually make full-time incomes doing exactly what I'm doing right now. They just do a few things differently. So that's when the light bulb went off. I was like, hey, I could do this full time. I can really make this into a business and then have that lifestyle where I get a lot more choices and a lot more flexibility over how I operate with my schedule.
Now, saying this as somebody who's 21 years old is still something. It's nothing to sneeze at. But when you started your blog, you were 11 years old. So were you thinking these same things, or was it more or less you were just concerned with, well, I could do this and I could make money doing it, and money is great, even at the age of 11, you know that money's great.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely, as you create more content, as you grow, age and anything like that, just as you put more time, you learn more things. So, obviously, I had a different viewpoint in the beginning. It was more of like, wow, this thing can make me money and I can make it full time. So, like something similar to that. Now, I think more about impact and how the content affects people. But initially, I was like, wow, this thing could actually be a business and I could connect with Red Sox fans, which was important to me because being in New York. But that's what was probably when I was first starting out, some of the thoughts going through my mind.
And just out of curiosity and to kind of paint a picture, you said that your mom kind of brought this idea to you, and she was very supportive of it. What do your parents do, and are they entrepreneurs as well? So you kind of had this instilled in you.
So my dad used to be an entrepreneur. So he has that background. My mom is an entrepreneur right now. She helps people with their health. She's a functional medicine nutritionist, so she helps a lot of people that way. So she'll help people achieve that healthy life transformation. So we're all either we had an entrepreneurial background, or we are entrepreneurs right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I was wondering because it definitely seems like, I mean, at the age of 11, it'd be a little bit different, I think. But, to have somebody who's saying, hey, you should check this out and you should do this, and kind of like encouraging you and kind of coaching you through. Now, obviously, this has led to the age that you are now, which we will close that gap for the listener. But to have somebody who continues to kind of support you and say, yes, absolutely go for this. I think without that entrepreneurial background, it may not have been the same for you.
Oh, I mean, I would say that I mean, I'm definitely lucky I got the people who I had, but I feel like you don't need to have entrepreneurial parents to be an entrepreneur. It certainly helps, but as long as you just have some kind of mentor to help you, it gives you the very similar effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. I think what I wanted to say was that and you are obviously still going on to college and pursuing some of your dreams, but I think that there definitely could be a possibility for someone's parents to say, "Hey, I'm glad this blogging thing is going really well for you, but you should still think about maybe going to college,
Yeah.
and getting a degree." I think that for someone who does not have that entrepreneurial parent involved, it could be something that they were faced with.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. Like I haven't experienced it, but I understand where that comes from.
And so, as you were going through, at 11 years old, I guess you were probably like at about the middle school age because you're usually about, 13 to 14 years old when you enter high school. So, over the course of that 2 years, when you started your blog and then moved on into high school, did you stick with Red Sox or had you already started exploring some other options for blogs?
So when they finally converted to WordPress, that's when I realized I could create a blog about anything. So for a while, I actually had a blog about Yu-Gi-Oh cards that actually did really well. It got, I think, at its peak, like 500 daily visitors. So it was more than a respectable blog. One of the actual top in that niche because there weren't as many. You go in digital marketing, there's so many more out there. So that was the one that I did right until like freshman year of high school because that's when I decided to commit to the content marketing. And it was really hard to leave that blog because it was something I had done for like maybe 3 years. I'd seen success. I was making some money from it. But I knew that for the long term, which is something that all of us have to focus on, I knew that it was the better choice to go all in on content marketing, which is the decision I made. So come like middle of freshman year, I'm entirely focused on markguberti.com and the whole content marketing scene.
And so, at such a young age, where do you think this focus came from, or this, awareness that, okay, I need to pick something that I'm going to be able to focus on, that I can really, really build? Like, I mean, we're talking about being 13 or 14 years old, and these are very, very high level concepts that you're already grasping at that point. So did this come from school? Did this come from your parents? Was it something that you kind of just had a feeling about?
That's a great question. I would say, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've had the focus for a while. One of the things I do remember, for Halloween, I couldn't eat candy because I was allergic. So instead, I got like a certain amount of money based on how many candies I collected. But I would keep track. I would like know how many Hershey's I got, know how many like Kit Kats I got, and all those. I would have spreadsheets like on paper before I used numbers on Apple. But I mean, I guess I just had that level of focus then. So I mean, that's one of those like you got like deep dive in your mind on. So that's like the best I can come up with right now.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It's key for me to ask those deep dive questions. That's what we're here to do. So I'm glad that one really made you think. And so, you're a freshman in high school. Where did this concept of content marketing come in? I mean, I know you probably had to market your blog a little bit, but what did your, marketing for your, Yu-Gi-Oh blog look like at that point? And how did you kind of get into this understanding or this concept of content marketing?
Honestly, at that stage, the marketing was lighter than what it is now. Like I would tweet about it. That's pretty much all I did on marketing on my own. But part of the marketing at the time, because of when I started, and also because there weren't that many blogs about Yu-Gi-Oh at all, I would just create content and it would rank on top of search engines pretty quickly, just because there wasn't that many existing blogs out there on the same topic. So it was definitely a little lighter. But when I did make the shift, it's harder to rank for the keyword content marketing in something like Yu-Gi-Oh. So that's when I looked at relationship building as my main way to market, and then having all those social networks, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all those promoting the content. And I focused more on content marketing because I was creating different content like video and blog posts. So it wasn't like getting more blog traffic anymore. It was getting more people to my brand and getting them on my email list.
And you said that you were focusing on relationship building. And is that you wanted to build relationships with people who were following you, or you were creating content surrounding building relationships, if that makes sense?
Oh, I was more focused on building relationships with people, not on creating content about building relationships from a marketing context. So I build relationships with people in my audience because sometimes it's like if someone's like liking your stuff, they want to feel like they're heard. So you engage with them, and then it's definitely a different experience than if you keep putting out content and then you don't do anything with that relationship. So I engage with people in my audience. I also engage with people who I've looked up to, who I feel like would be a great fit for a virtual summit or a podcast I'm doing. So the more relationships I'm able to build each day that I'm able to properly nurture, the better.
And this is something that you were focusing on as a freshman and, let's say, sophomore in high school.
Yes.
Because that is one of the strangest times as a human being, I think. I mean, because, okay, I guess it could be argued that middle school is a strange time because, you've got a lot of things that are going on. You're going through puberty. There's a lot of changes going on. I get that. But I think once it becomes your freshman and sophomore year, I think that that's a very, very difficult time for people who are that age, because you've kind of already gone through the puberty stage, so to speak. You're not an adult yet. And even still, when you graduate high school, you're not an adult yet. But at that point, for freshman, sophomore, and then into junior year. And it seems like now it's even more than it was when I was that age, which, mind you, was not that long ago. It seems like you're being pressured to make these big life decisions. And it's just, there's a lot going on at that point. So that's in my opinion, a very, very difficult time in someone's life. So you were really grasping some high level concepts at such a young age.
Yeah, and it definitely builds over time as you read more books and just surround yourself with the right kind of education, because the school education is great, but it's the self-education that really propels you to the next level of what you want to do.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, because that's why I started this podcast. Like, yes, I went to college and I have a degree, but I feel like having interactions with people specifically through this podcast, I'm continuing to learn and I'm continuing to grow. And I think that can be the same across a lot of different fields. That's why people go on and get their masters. That's why people go on and get their PhD. These people who want to take a step up, to move forward, to progress, they're constantly learning.
Yeah. That's how you got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, as you're kind of creating this content, you're going through high school, when were you actually creating this content? Before school, after school? Were you going to some sort of formal schooling? Were you actually, like getting on a school bus or, getting on the subway and going to school every day? Or were you doing like a homeschool kind of thing? What did that look like for you?
We usually get driven to school. That's how the getting to school part worked.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding doing the work, like for my business, I briefly tried like a little bit in college, like doing it before the day started, but that just did not work at all. Because I would feel because you don't want to wake up too early to do business stuff and then feel tired in the middle of your class. So that's something I didn't want to have happen. So what works for me is wake up at normal time like any other person who's just trying to get to school, and that's your only objective. Then in school, anytime I had a free, it would be work. Like I would eat lunch with people and talk with them and stuff like that. But free time in school, especially in high school, meant work. Now, I've changed that a little bit in college, especially since I know I'm one semester away from graduating. So what I do is I pick 2 days to stack all my classes, and then I have the rest of the time where I get extra time at home to do my work. So that has, like the way I approach it has changed. There are some differences like those I mentioned between high school and college. But I couldn't get myself to wake up early to do the work. And when I say early, I mean like 4:30 in the morning. Like that would be my version of waking up early. So I couldn't get myself to do that. So I'm able to do it later on in any free time I get.
And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you about that, because, this happens quite frequently. And I think that for some of us over on the endurance side of it, we're kind of conditioned to think that, you need to get up early and get your workouts in, before you go to work, because things happen after work and you can't get it done. Things pop up and, kids get sick and this and that. And, sometimes that becomes discouraging for people because they don't want to get up just like you, they don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, how did you kind of overcome that and switch your focus and you were still okay with doing the work a little bit later? You didn't let not being able to do it at 4 o'clock in the morning discourage you from chasing this dream.
Yeah. So obviously it depends on what kind of schedule you have, because my summer schedule and my college schedule are certainly very different. I like to view the workout and stuff like that as a break. So in the middle of the day, if I'm working on my business and I'm starting to, there's a point where you get fatigued. You're not tired, like you don't need a nap, but like you just can't think about doing the business anymore, that's when I take a break. I'll maybe bike for 30 minutes because I usually get my run in the morning. So I will use the workout as a gap, as a break after the work. So I feel like if you start the day doing work and being productive, it's going to be easier to be productive for the rest of the day. While people who, I mean, of course, if the schedule works for you, then go for it. But for people who they wake up, they start off their workout. I mean, I've had that schedule. It feels amazing. And I love having the workout throughout the whole day. But some people who do that to themselves may find that they're up for too many hours without getting a single thing done for work. So it's definitely very complicated. It's based on what you prefer, even if you just do something, a really basic task like respond to emails or write 500 words before you work out. But it's certainly a question where you got to look at it on an individual basis. And even for me, like in some cases, I will wake, like I recently ran in a half marathon and that was in the morning. So I couldn't shift it later in the day, in between work. So it's definitely a case by case basis.
And would you say that it's something that, you can test and try and figure out and see what works best for you? Obviously, you said, everybody is different. So
Yeah.
something that works for Mark isn't necessarily going to be something that works for Paul. Do you feel like it's something that you can kind of test and figure out as you go along?
Yeah, you could definitely test it, figure it out as you go. And, it may change for you also. Like something that works for you today may not work for you 6 months from now. So it's definitely something you have to keep testing and experimenting with.
And because we're on the topic right now, when it comes to, adapting and pivoting and doing things like that, how important do you feel that ability is to success?
I'd say it's really important because no matter how much you plan, something is going to happen to the plan. So think of it this way. If you're able to adapt, that is perseverance. That is a skill that makes it easier for you to not just adapt again in the future, but easier for you to stay the course. A lot of people, like the big problem is that they don't stay the course. They have this big idea, they have this big product that they think is going to be successful, but then they start doing it and they're not as confident, or maybe even they go through the whole thing and they just have a bad launch and then they just give up on it. So one of the hard things is for people to stay the course. So if you're able to adapt and if something happens, you're able to just deal with it, not let the inconvenience ruin your day. You're getting better at adapting, but you're also getting better at staying the course. So I'd say it's very important for people, not just entrepreneurs, but anyone.
And so as you were kind of rounding out your high school career and thinking about going on to college, take me through that process. What did that look like? Did you automatically know that because you were into this, this content creation and this content marketing? I feel like this was probably something that was relatively new, so I don't necessarily know that there were college courses that were being offered specifically for content marketing, but did you go on to something like a marketing major?
Well, that's interesting because I knew that like content marketing, social media, there's really not that many courses yet that really cover that. That is something that I do hope to change. I would like to see more colleges talk about that. So there wasn't really much going on in that space. There still isn't if you look across the nation for the majority of schools. But what I would say about, transitioning from high school to college, initially I was thinking, well, I get college is helpful for a lot of people, but maybe it's not as helpful for me because content marketing is not a strong point. And I'm at the point now where I could just interview someone and learn. But I did go to college, and one of the big things for me, like I could have majored in marketing and that would have definitely helped me get better grades, but I chose to major in finance, and that taught me investing. And I continue to learn stuff in the classes that I take, even though I'm doing research, even though I'm reading stuff from like Seeking Alpha and other places like that. But I learn in my classes because of the major I chose, and I'm learning stuff that I can apply. So, I mean, as a student, I'm definitely very happy about that. So, I did, though, during that high school experience, decide, okay, if I am going to go to college, I want the option to get out early. So I stacked up on my APs to prepare for that. So my advice for everyone based on that whole story is if you're at a point where you don't know what the best choice is, do the best you can today so that based on regardless of where you go, whether it's uh, in the college case, whether you go or you don't go, do the stuff today so that you're better positioned. So in the don't go bracket, like put yourself in a position where you're more likely to make six figures or seven figures or whatever the income is that you feel like you need to be making. If you do want to go to college, put yourself in a better position by getting better grades in high school because that helps with scholarships and fun stuff like that. And also taking APs so that if you do go to college and you're in this limbo, at least you have the option to get out early. So even if you are on this limbo in any area of your life, that doesn't mean pause. That means put in the work so that regardless of which option you make, it's going to be the right choice.
And so, as you're kind of weaving your way through college, and obviously you're still working on this blog. So is it still a blog for you, or did you kind of shift with the times? I know that some people are saying that blogging is almost dead unless you're Gary Vee or Tim Ferriss and you already have this massive following there. But it's a crowded space, so it's very loud and it's difficult for someone who does not have a following to just up and start a blog right now. So are you continuing with the blog, or did you adapt and kind of change what you were focusing on?
I still do some blogging, but I have adapted. Like I do 3 interviews a week for Breakthrough Success, my podcast. I'm doing 2 episodes a week for my upcoming show, Profitable Public Speaking. And the reason I like the podcasting format, not only do I enjoy it, like I enjoy asking questions, as you probably enjoy it right now, and it just keeps getting more fun. But it's a lot easier for me to talk than it is for me to speak because regardless of how good you are at typing, you will not be able to keep up with everything I'm saying if you have to type it out right now without pausing this episode because we speak at a much faster pace than we type. And that means I can provide my audience with more content in a shorter period of time. So that's why I do a lot of podcast episodes. Also great for the accountability factor. I'm also looking to do more video, like each interview turns into video, so that's already happening. The blogging, I feel like when people think something is dead, sometimes it's a great opportunity to jump back in. So I have stayed consistent with blogging. I'm not blogging every day like I used to, but I try to find time to blog 1 to 2 times each week.
Interesting. That's a great point there, especially when it comes to, I actually just had somebody ask me about a week or so ago, like, oh, are you posting your podcast or, getting it out there on Twitter? And I kind of looked at him and I was like, no, not really. Twitter's kind of dead, but that's a good point because, now that people feel like Twitter is dead, some people are still on there, and so this could potentially be a good opportunity for me to leverage that platform of Twitter to promote the podcast to the audience that is still on there.
That is a really great point. And side note on Twitter, the people who are on there a lot, the media. So we have a platform that a lot of people think is dead because I've heard that from a few people.
Mm-hmm.
But the media is on it. So you have a dead platform where a lot of people on the media are, easier chance to stand out.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And so, you've really started to kind of turn this into more than just content creation as far as like online content goes. You've turned this into books, and you're an author, and you're speaking, and you have this goal to impact 1 billion people. So talk to me a little bit about what it is that you're trying to do, and some of these things that you've done, especially with your books.
So impact can mean a lot of different things. For some people, it means you read my book, you're able to apply it to your business, and now you're seeing these awesome results. For other people, I that's just one of the reasons why I put in so much work, already, is that I wanted people to see that age is not a limit to success. It's been something that, like my products have changed, my launch has changed, my strategies have changed, but the message, like, age is not a limit to success and it's never too early to start. Those I've held dear, like, since the beginning of my journey. So my idea is, if I could be this massive success as a teenager, that's going to inspire more teens around the world to pursue their dreams. And that, I mean, that's the kind of impact that I want to have, where I show more people and inspire more people to start at an earlier age, because of all the new technology we have and all the opportunities we have.
And you mentioned it yourself there, but I would like to expand on it a little bit more, because all throughout this time, you have been doing this at a very young age. And so have you given any advice to people as far as your content marketing goes?
I mean, yeah, for content marketing, I've certainly given a lot of advice to people.
Right.
Some of them, like, not all of them are teens, but my advice would always focus on creating that valuable content for your tribe, really taking the time to interact with them and have some way to monetize it. Because if you don't monetize it, you just have an expensive hobby. And it may seem great, especially if you're a teen where all of your expenses are covered. But then when you get older and, like, you graduate college or something like that, it's got to make money eventually. So have a way to monetize it also.
And have you received any kickback, especially when it comes to your books or some of the coaching that you're doing, from people who are saying, what do you know about this? You're just a kid. You haven't even really been in the marketing game. You haven't been out in the real world, so to speak. You're just kind of out of place. You're putting the cart before the horse. Anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I got a lot of that, especially when I was starting. So this is more like 12, 13, 14. That's when all those comments came at, like, full force. But that stopped because people saw that I had 100,000 Twitter followers at the time. People saw that I had written books. So people saw that I was an authority. So it doesn't matter what your age is. Like, you could definitely be that authority who people come to respect. Because, like, probably like 16 on, I'm not getting that kind of stuff anymore, because at this point I have the brand, I have the presence, I have the blog, and it just compounds from there. But definitely, like, those initial years, people just see someone young trying to, give business advice. And there are thoughts like that. But I feel like if you're doing anything worthwhile, you're going to get criticism. So there's no reason to escaping it. And there's no reason also to fake your age. There's no reason to hide behind a picture and say that you're, like, 40 instead of, if, like, you always want to be you. You don't want to hide behind something else because you're afraid of what people will say, because criticism comes in all ages. I mean, I don't think that when I graduate college and enter the real world, I don't think the criticism is going to stop. And some people would feel like I am in that real world right now, whatever that means. But yeah, you're never going to please everyone. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter what criticism you get. What matters is how you handle it.
And it's funny that you say that, because I was just talking with somebody the other day who was receiving a lot of criticism for some of the things that they've done kind of over in this endurance world. And, I said to him, listen, if you're not doing something that's worthwhile, then you're not going to have any, quote unquote haters. You're not going to have anybody who's criticizing you. But when you start doing things that are worthwhile and you start doing, big things, that's when the criticisms are going to come out. And so that's exactly when you started to see the criticisms as well. But I do have to ask, if these criticisms, affected you in any way. I'm sure that kind of as time went along, you grew a little bit of a thicker skin, so to speak. But, when it first started, especially being, a young age, did this, impact you at all and kind of mess with your emotions a little bit when you were first getting started?
I wouldn't say it hit me that hard because being a Red Sox fan in New York, you gotta have pretty thick skin already. But the first time where I got a comment that was laced with profanity, I mean, that was probably a rough one. But when I say rough, like it only takes me like 1 to 2 hours to just get over something and move on. Because if you keep thinking about something like what this person said and, it's still affecting you for like 5 or 10 years from now, that's not something that you want to have because, in that 5, 10 years, that person already, in like the next day, that person already forgot what they said. And you really want to look at the person who is criticizing you because you won't see like some like role model, like some super successful person in business who started young say, oh, you're too young to be starting. You will see people who maybe they've never started a business or they failed a business say, oh, you're too young to be teaching this. So also take the time to look at who is criticizing you because some criticism is corrective and that's good. But there's also a lot of negative criticism that almost in all cases just comes from negative people who aren't worth the time of day for you to be acknowledging their criticism.
They're just trolls. They're
Yeah,
just
exactly.
out there. They're just out there to kind of take digs at people, get a reaction, and they thrive off of getting that reaction. And so instead of you giving a reaction to them, did you turn this into motivation for you to grow your Twitter to 100,000 followers, to have, a best-selling book, to do some of the things that you've gone on to do?
That's a good point. Yeah, I did think about that. I was like, I'm gonna screenshot this, what this person said, and then go back to it when, I had the bestseller and all that stuff like that. But you don't want to have the motivation be like, I'm gonna show you,
Mm-hmm.
because that's an indirect way of like, seeking approval. Just doing something for the sake of one person, you lose sight of what you should be focusing on. So, like, I became a best-selling author eventually, but instead of thinking about that one person who said you're never going to make it, I thought of like the thousands of people who have believed in me, who have supported my content. So, I would rather think about the people who have been supporting me than focus on the people who have said one or two negative things. Who, you're never going to please them. Like if you say like, I made a best-selling author, they're going to say, oh, you haven't done this. So it doesn't really get you anywhere to look at that kind of stuff.
I could completely understand that completely. And so we spoke about it earlier, but I think it's also going to fit in right here as well because we're talking about, staying the course and not letting, these hateful comments and these trolls and things get to you. So what would be like your 1 to 3 tips for someone on how to stay the course and how to stick with whatever it is that they're doing?
I would say first have a long-term perspective. If it's something that you can do for 5 years or more, and that's going to help you big time, versus something where you feel like it has to happen now. Because if you keep sticking with it and it's something you enjoy and you're building relationships, the time will eventually come at its correct time. But it's not something that may happen right away. So, first tip right there, having that patience and thinking long term. Another tip would be, I kind of mentioned this earlier, build relationships because there are people who have already achieved everything that you were trying to achieve. And it's good to talk with those people to figure out how you can speed along on the path and get those same results quicker. My third thing would be to look at what you've already done because a lot of people, the reason they stop is they look at that big obstacle ahead of them and they don't think they can do it. What they fail to do is they don't look behind and see all the obstacles they've already conquered and see that they have an audience that loves them. So I would say for that third tip, just take some time, see what you've already accomplished, and then all those big obstacles look a lot easier.
And I think that that's not only applicable in business, but specifically given my background, taking the time to look back and reflect on how far you've come in a weight loss journey is also very, very important, because there's going to be times where the scale doesn't move. Okay, and I have always said that you can't just focus on that scale number. You got to look at other things as well. But if the scale is something that you're using to measure your progress, and you've lost 75 pounds and you have 2 weeks in a row where you don't lose any weight, looking back at that progress that you've already made should keep you on that straightened arrow and that good path to continue on and get to that next level, that next goal that you're working towards. So I think that that's a very, very good point, and it's something that I completely agree with, and I really appreciate you bringing that up.
My pleasure. Thanks for expanding on it.
And so you have, like we said earlier, you have a goal to impact 1 billion people, right? How is it that you are working towards that goal? What are you doing to work towards that goal of impacting 1 billion people? Because you said that the definition of impacting someone is different for everybody, and you have your own definition of impacting people. But what is it that you are doing in order to reach that goal?
Part of that is continuing to create all this valuable content to continue to grow my audience so people can learn more about that content, and also going into more advertising, because then I could come across even more people that way. But in a lot of these goals where people say billion, like $1 billion, like Warren Buffett's a great example of this. He made the majority of his wealth, I believe 99% of his wealth came after his 50th birthday. So this is something where you keep putting in the work, and it compounds and it compounds, and over time, the vision makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more understandable. So right now, I mean, with my current model, do I reach 1 billion people? Maybe not. But as I continue to use advertising, as I continue to impact more people with my content, do a lot more speaking and different things like that. I mean, who knows what can happen in the course of my lifetime. But the idea is that you keep putting in the work, and it's going to keep compounding and compounding. And as you continue to grow, you're going to ask yourself bigger questions. So I'd say if you do have a big goal like that, think about what you can do now and keep excelling, keep going to the next level as often as you can. And eventually you're going to reach that point where you do have that kind of impact or whatever equivalent goal it is for you.
And so you have been on this kind of like upwards trajectory since you started your blog back in the early days about the Red Sox. And I'm sure it has not been just a straight line all the way up. It's that same picture that we've probably all seen floating around the internet, where it's the squiggly line that kind of goes all over the place that says, this is what success really looks like. But what is one thing that you quit doing that you feel like has enabled your success or has helped your success?
I stopped playing video games. That was the biggest thing for me, because I do still play video games, but I only play them at other people's houses and at different locations other than my house, so that it's always a multiplayer versus like a single player. So I stopped doing video games. That was a big thing for me, because instead of taking a break by playing video games, I'm biking, I'm reading, I'm doing more work on my business. So I'd say getting rid of that allowed me to put a lot more time into the business, because sometimes, you spend hours on the same game. So I'd say that was the big thing for me. So there are a lot of people who ask, well, Mark, like, what do you even do now? So, a lot of exercise. That's a lot of my day other than work. I also do some ping pong or pool, depending on if it's a good day outside or not. But it's all physical. I'm not the guy who you'll find sitting around like hitting buttons on a controller or watching TV unless it's the Red Sox in the postseason or something with the whole family. So I'd say that was a big one for me.
And you just mentioned it multiple times there, so I want to expand on it. How has focusing on your health and your fitness improved your business? Because I have heard from, quite a few people who own their own business and who have then kind of made a switch to still focus on their business, but really start to take their health seriously. There's a correlation there. So how has that helped you?
Well, first, I know what people are going through who are thinking about this journey. If you exercise for an hour, you lose an hour that you could be working on your business instead. I know that's what people are thinking who haven't done it yet. And if you do exercise for that hour, you are far more productive for the other hours in your day. I noticed because going into high school, I decided to join the cross country team eventually, track and field also. And that's daily exercise. And instead of leaving at 2:40 from school and going home and doing my work, it would be wait until practice started until 3:15 or 3:30, be done with it around 5 or maybe even 5:30, and then drive home. I'll get driven home. I'm not gonna get driven home, and then do my work. So I was on school, like campus, more because I went the fitness route. And my productivity skyrocketed because you're much more alert, you're much more alive. And the thing I noticed is I exercise every day, but on days that I don't exercise, like right now I'm taking 2 weeks off from running because that's what you do as a runner. But if I don't exercise, I don't get my exercise. And it is true of my brother also because he also exercises every day. You don't feel good throughout the day. It's easier to get moody. It's harder to be productive and stay focused on the task in front of you. So exercising, yes, if you exercise for 1 hour, that's a time that you can't be responding to emails unless you're walking and doing it at the same time. But it pays such great dividends to be exercising. It's one of the greatest investments you can make in yourself just to make exercise a daily habit.
And for a lot of the people who are listening, they probably just like stopped and they were like, wait, what did he just say? Yes, Marc did say as a runner he was taking 2 weeks off. So for all of you out there who cannot fathom taking 2 weeks away from running, who are in this endurance world, sometimes it is good to take a break from whatever it is that you're doing and, take a little rest, maybe a reset, try something new. You'd be surprised what you learn about yourself and what you learn you might actually like by taking a little break.
Yeah, and you also prevent injury from a health standpoint because
yes.
I decided to take my 2 week break right after my half marathon, and I was horizontal, not even sleeping, but like horizontal more than I was vertical and like walking around like after that half marathon. Like, I don't know what it would have been like to run the next day.
Yeah, I can completely understand that, as I'm sure many people who are going to be listening to the podcast are going to feel as well. You're kind of, preaching to the choir when it comes to the running thing, but I'm sure that as much as people don't want to hear it, it's something that we need to reinforce every once in a while that, yes, taking a break and a reset like that is good for you, and it's also very good for your body, as Marc just said. So I think that that's something that's very important there that we would like, I would like to focus in on and just reiterate for the people who are the endurance athletes from the show.
100%.
And so just as we start to kind of wind down, I want to be very respectful of your time, Marc. Is there anything that you would like to add, anything that you would like to include here in the episode that I did not bring up, but that you feel has been very impactful or important during this journey?
As mentioned already, relationships are a big thing. Interviews are a big thing, as you and I know, because we host podcasts. But one of the biggest things for me is putting those two together for virtual summits. So virtual summits are something that have really helped me grow my business. I help people through my virtual summit blueprint if they are interested in having their own virtual summit. And just as an example of what a virtual summit's like, I host the Content Marketing Success Summit over at contentmarketingsuccesssummit.com, over 70 speakers, and that is an evergreen one. So there's certainly a lot with that model if you're looking to grow from a business standpoint, because it gets the benefits of relationship building, it gets the benefits of interviewing people. It's one of the, and growing an audience, because you grow your email list big time. So definitely wanted to bring that up at the end also.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, Marc, I just want to take a minute to, recognize you and say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation that we were able to have this evening, and I thank you for carving out some time to sit down with me. I would just like to ask you one more favor. If people are interested and they would like to get in touch with you, where is the best place or places for them to reach out, and maybe if it's even just to say hello?
Contentmarketingsuccesssummit.com. That is the best place to go. You could also find me on Breakthrough Success. I host a podcast on all the big players. I also have Breakthrough Success Radio, which is on a few places. Every Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern, new content is coming out there. So I say those are some good places to find me.
Great. Well, like I said, Marc, thank you so much for sitting down with me this evening, and thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Ian, my man, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, that is it. That is my whole complete conversation with Marc Guberti. What was something that really resonated with you? What was something that you could really relate to from Marc's story? Or what was something that really surprised you from Marc's story? As we close out the podcast, I want you to just take a minute and think about that and reflect on the conversation and see if there was anything that really sat with you, or anything that you could really relate to, or anything that really surprised you. I would like to take a minute to just thank you, the listener of the Do It For Yourself podcast, for coming and hanging out with us for this little chat that we had. And I really appreciate you giving us your time to come and hang out, whether it be you're in the car, you're doing your workout, you're out walking the dog, or you're at work. I really appreciate you giving us your time to come and hang out for this conversation. If you could do me a favor in exchange, I would really, really appreciate if you could give us just a little bit more of your time and leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app. That is something that would really help us out here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. So, like I said, if you could just take a couple minutes to do that, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. The other way that you can help support us here on the show is by simply taking a little screenshot, sharing that on your Instagram stories, in your Instagram feed, Facebook, with your friends, so that we can bring some new listeners here to the Do It For Yourself podcast. So if you could take some time to do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. And until then, I will see you next week with another amazing interview. And I hope that you have a fantastic week and weekend ahead.